Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builders Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number CL3029-6-600. This is a double-acting hinge from Bommer, and it is, with really just one exception, the most common double-acting spring hinge, really, by Bommer for typical 1 3/4 doors. This is a CL. What that means is that it has ball tips on it, top and bottom. Not uncommon. You'll see this generally when people buy these. They're replacing an existing hinge, something that may have been in service for several decades. It's of course not uncommon to do new installations with ball tips. They might be matching some sort of work that was done prior, or whomever the client or end user is. They simply like the ball tip sort of treatment that's on here. So that's what the CL stands for. The 3029 stands for the fact that this is indeed a double-acting spring hinge. So the door will be able to operate in a double-acting sort of fashion. The 6 is a reference to the size of the hinge naturally, but it's really more so a reference to the thickness of door that the hinge is intended to accommodate, and we'll get to more of that in a moment. This 600 part of the part number means that it is two things. It's both made of steel, it's a steel-based product, and that it is in a prime coat finish. Okay, available in all of the common finishes: your brass, your bronze, your chromes, oil rubbed, zinc, bright black japanned. Bommer will entertain really any finish possible to put on steel. So, double-acting spring hinge. Let's go over the extended description portion below this. First of all, it's non-template, meaning that the location of the screw holes don't follow any industry standard pattern, except that the location of these screw holes is standard for Bommer's 3029, or in this case, CL3029. Non-handed. It can be used for doors that swing in any direction. It's inherently non-handed because a door hanging this will swing in both directions. Okay, this is what they call classic ball tips. Okay, again made of steel. Now that 6-inch reference, before we get to the dimensional drawing of the item itself, is most importantly understood as this: if your door is between 1 1/4 and 1 3/4 thick, the 6 inches is definitely a hinge that you can consider for your application. Moving forward with that sort of consideration, they're expecting that you're going to have a minimum door height of 7 foot or 6'8". Maximum weight, if you're using 2 hinges, to be about 75 pounds, up to 107 pounds if you've got 3 spring hinges. Maximum door width for 2 hinges would be 2'8", and maximum door width for 3 hinges would be 3 foot wide. Okay, so most common scenario for this hinge is going to be exactly this. It's going to be a 3070 solid core wood door that you're going to have in a restaurant, back of the house, you know, from the front of the retail, whatever the application might be. It's going to be double acting. You're going to have 3 spring hinges. 2 will be mounted at the top and 1 down at the bottom, and we're going to go over that very shortly here. Everything on this hinge is surface mounted. The leaf to the jamb, well, pardon me, everything on this hinge can be surface mounted. The leaf to the jamb is certainly surface mounted right to the cased opening frame. The leaf to the door can either be surface mounted or it can be mortised, and we're going to talk about that in a moment. Do not use on, and just completing the rest of the extended description, do not use on doors that are beveled. These are intended for use on doors that are square-edged only. Okay. Packaged with all wood screws. That is certainly common and typical that you'll get screws for a wood application. If you are using, and this hinge is 600 or prime coat, you know, they're not going to put a lot of effort into making sure the head of the screw is going to match. This is a chrome sort of finish. They're expecting that you're going to paint this. If you are doing a metal door, this is not the hinge you want. It can be the hinge you want, but it's not. You want the CL3029 6 by 4.5, and what happens in that case is that the leaf that goes to the door is intended to go into the preparation of a metal door for a typical 4.5-inch hinge. So if you need help finding that, feel free to reach out to us. Now, We've exhausted the definition of the item that's in the extended description. There are 2 links below this video. One is called Template, and the other is called Installation Instructions. Installation Instructions is a 2-page document that incorporates, I may have misspoke. The document is the first link that we're going to go over, and that gives some overview. Let's just focus on that first. As the next document, Installation Instructions, that's the 2-page item, and some of the information is duplicated. Let's simply start with the template. That's got the bulk of what should be said. So first of all, you'll see in the lower left-hand corner a dimensional drawing of the hinge. You can certainly see where that 6-inch reference comes from. That's the height of the door leaf. As far as I'm concerned, it's important to know that only for curiosity, I suppose, because again, 6-inch pertains to that 1.25 to 1.75 door thickness range. That's what you have to know. 1.75 is the standard thick common situation. You can certainly get away with an 1.5-inch thick door on this. If your door is thicker than that, this isn't the hinge. You'll need a 7-inch, depending on the thickness. If it's thinner than 1.5 inches, if it's 1.5 inches, I'd go with a 5-inch hinge, but then depending on the weight of the hinge. If you have a question about which hinge to use, feel free to reach out to us and we'll help determine that. All of the other dimensions are indicated in that drawing in incredible detail, which I won't go into. Moving above there, you'll see the thickness of the leaf at 105 thousandths of an inch for the jamb flange. You can see the drawing in the upper left-hand corner, how it's installed. Okay, you're going to want the center line of the door to be the center line of the hinge to be the center line of the cased opening frame. Now, moving on to the information on the template that's important to discuss. You can see that in the upper right-hand corner. I may have been saying left and right incorrect. All that stuff is on the left, dimensional properties. Upper right-hand corner shows a typical single door installation, and then below that a typical double door installation. There's a table below that. That table allows you to determine what size the door needs to be. Well, what size the door needs to be is dependent on what you're already working with. Here are the variables. The size of the hinge, and whether or not you're going to mortise the door leaf or not. That's the first variable. The net size of the door, the inside width of the frame. Okay? So somewhere you have to start with something. Let's say that you have an existing hollow metal cased opening frame, which is typical. And in that case, you might want different screws, but we can help you with that, with different screws. You might indicate in the comment field, send half machine screws for the jamb leaf. Okay, so typical installation is a 3070 welded cased opening frame in a movie theater. From back of the food preparation area out, there could be a double acting door. You've got a wood door. You need to order that wood door based on what size you need it to actually be considered at. You know you've got a 36-inch wide opening because that would be industry standard for a cased opening frame. You're going to get a wood door. You either already have one or you're going to order one. Let's say you already have one and it's 36-inch wide. It's just a full and square wood door and you're going to plane it down to fit. Okay, great. That's a variable that you can manipulate to use in this scenario. The next question is how small to make the door is going to be based on whether or not you're going to mortise that leaf going to the door itself. Now, we're talking about a single door in this installation, and we'll just, go through that. You can see in the upper right-hand corner, you've got frame opening. In our scenario, it's 36-inch, equals the actual door width plus the A dimension from the table. The A dimension is either 1/2 inch if you surface mount the door leaf, or it is 7/16 if you mortise that leaf. Okay? Now, what they're indirectly telling you is the net width of the door needs to be 36 less 1/2 inch or 7/16. What the information that's indirectly given is this hinge leaf doesn't need all of that space, but they're giving you that dimension assuming that you've got a square edge door and it needs to clear the other jamb. so that the margin between the door and frame is basically equal on both sides. It's going to be quite close to being equal. It's very common that that leaf is mortised, so 7/16 of an inch, if you can, would be, although it's incredibly minor, it might be preferable to have it mortised. But that's how you go about determining where you're starting with in order to get this installed. You might have a door and you can't change the width of the door, and it might be X. Well, to the door width, add whatever margin, 1/2 inch or 7/16, possibly 1/2 inch in this scenario where you can't alter the door, and then you're going to build a cased opening frame around it. There you go. Now, for double doors, it's the same sort of logic, except that you've got, you know, your frame opening, 2 actual net door widths plus the B dimension, okay? And that's going to give you the margin required on the hinge sides, but also a margin required between the 2 doors so that they can operate correctly. They're basically counting on you having square edge doors is the point of the matter with this. And that is, of course, the most typical and common way to install these. So, finishing up the template, if you have any questions on how to size the door, please feel free to reach out to us. Let's move on now to the link called Installation Instructions. That's a 2-page document. Page 1 basically shows the information in the top half of that page is quite self-explanatory. Just an overall, or a floor plan sort of view of that door. The important information to know is if you are doing 3 hinges on the door, install them as they're shown here. 2 at the top, 1 at the bottom. That hinge at the bottom doesn't do any work, but keep that door just in the opening. It doesn't do any of the holding, doesn't do really any of the bringing it back to center. All of the weight's occurring on that top hinge. So if you've got 3, put 2 at the top. If you are truly unsure, if it's 2 or 3 hinges total, go to 3 hinges, period. I mean, these hinges are not inexpensive, but the truth of the matter is, if you are on the borderline of something, what you'll notice is that you've got to turn the tension up so high in the spring hinge to get the door just to stay in the opening without, you know, coming out of the opening as a result of how it will end up swinging, that you risk damaging the spring hinge. You know, the tension can only be set so high in those, and we'll go over that in a moment. So 2 at the top, 3 inch from the top, 3 inch between each other. Those are not hard and fast rules, but that's what Bommer recommends that you do. Okay, now moving on to the second page of the installation instructions. The 6 diagrams in the upper left-hand corner are really just for your review. The diagram in the lower left-hand corner is the same as the prior diagram, except that in the instance where you have a pair of doors, and this is important, these tension collars, and we'll get to setting tension in a moment, on one door will be pointed towards the top. On the other door, you need to have them pointed towards the bottom, okay, such that the leaf, the door leaf, is on the same face of the opening for both doors. It will help for proper alignment when that is how you're installing it. So if you've got a pair of doors, tension collar, you can see down here there isn't one, goes towards the top, put them towards the bottom on the other door. Now, that's all that's on the lower left-hand corner telling you to do that. Everything else, the installation instructions, and they are included with your hinge order. Remove the spring tension from each barrel by inserting the tension rod into the tension adjustment hole. Rotate in the direction of the arrow as shown and remove the tension pin. Now, tension pin, you're going to need 2 tension pins. You will get 2 tension pins per hinge, and then a tension rod. The hinge does not come with the tension preloaded, but if it was, you've got an arrow here, and you've got an arrow here. Clockwise, when the tension collars are pointed towards the top. Clockwise. As you rotate that clockwise, you reveal new additional holes, and it's into one of those new additional holes that you insert the tension pin, and that's how you set the tension. So with this, what you're going to end up doing is getting the door in place, getting it shimmed in place, getting the hinges attached, getting it shimmed in place. Then once it's shimmed, because if you have the hinge attached with no tension, the door is just going to fall into the opening because the springs are loose. There's no tension set on that. Step 2 is to locate, attach the hinges. Step 3 is to align the center line of the hinge with the center line of the door with the center line of the jamb. For best alignment of double doors, we discussed that. Tension collar up on one door, down on the other. Do not exceed 5 holes of tension, and that's the crucial part, speaking earlier about how many spring hinges to have. If you get out to having 5 holes and you've got only 2 hinges installed, and let's say that door hits the frame as it closes and you've got the proper margins, telltale sign that you really need to have a 3rd hinge. There's no way to rectify that other than adding hardware. Setting of the tension is exactly by following the arrows. It's clockwise when the collar is pointed up. It's obviously counterclockwise when it's pointed towards the bottom of the door. Looking at the rest of the information, hinges are attached. Get the door in the closed position. Wedge it up from the floor until it's plumb. Everything is square. Set your tension. 5 holes maximum. The hinge on the bottom, they're saying that you really only need 1 hole of tension down there because, again, it's really not doing any of the work. And that is industry standard. Lubrication may be applied if needed. The only time really lubrication is needed is if the hinge is quite simply years old and there would be a very small amount of surface oxidation on the spring itself. In that case, you might find that you'll hear the hinge and then be able to remedy it by adding some lubrication. That would be where that would be most typically and commonly seen. Again, square edge doors, and that really completes all of the information on the page 2 or the document that's included. The last thing I'd like to point out to you on this is the Bommer logo. You all but can't see it. Right above it, it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer is quite proud of, as am I to represent them. If you have any questions on the Bommer CL3029-6-600 ball tip style double acting hinge or any other Bommer product, whose catalog you can review completely from the link below this video to the manufacturer's page, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.